Yeah, so Porter Airlines is an airline based out of Toronto. And so it does mostly regional flying and have now started longer flights out of Toronto Pearson as well. So the hub is here, which is great because when I work, I work in the operations control center as a duty officer now. And basically, what that means is all the behind the scenes kind of planning and decision making that goes into really running the airline. So that's my role in it. And so ultimately, I'm the one that makes the decisions based on all the information to try to keep the flight schedule maintained and dealing with all the internal or external factors that may impact the flight schedule. So whether that might be a snowstorm in a certain city or a maintenance issue on a certain aircraft, it's kind of revisiting where that aircraft or where those crew were supposed to go and then puzzling it out to try to keep everything running. And then ultimately, if you can't, then you get into delays or cancellations or diversions and things like that.
And how did you start working as a duty officer? Like, how did you get into this, I would say, rather, niche industry?
I ended up working in aviation because I started a high school co-op at Porter. So I was in grade 11, working in customer service. And then after that, I had thought I wanted to be a pilot. But after starting working in the airline and seeing kind of what other roles and departments there are, I was able to kind of revisit that idea. And then after I finished high school, I did a college program for aviation operations and safety. And then after that, I did a master's in aviation management, all while working in various roles at Porter. So I think what helped me kind of see that there were different career paths and stuff was really starting working, because other than that, just from the outside, you don't really always know, and you may just think of a few specific roles, but there actually can be a lot more.
So what does your day-to-day work look like as a duty officer?
So day to day, it's really a lot of the trying to be as proactive as possible when coming up with these plans. So when I come into work, I always look at the weather for each destination, and then that will kind of narrow down my focus as to if I really need to pay close attention to a certain station. If they may have fog or they may have snow. And then as things progress and the day begins, it's kind of replanning when things fall apart. So things usually start off pretty good, and then as the day moves on, it's the delays and things can catch up to you, and so it's just trying to stay ahead of things as much as possible.
Would you say that's probably I'm guessing that's probably the most challenging part of your job, or is there anything else that you would say is probably most difficult about it?
Yeah, I would say what's most difficult about it is the uncertainty when it comes to weather. For example, fog. Because the airport that I work from is based on an island, anytime there's any temperature fluctuations, it brings fog. And so to have your hub fogged in is not a very easy operational reality. So even yesterday, there were maybe 4 or 5 diversions because the aircraft weren't able to land in Toronto, and so they had to go to other airports. And so when that happens, then I have to come up with the recovery plans of how to get the passengers and the crew and the aircraft back to Toronto. But what makes it challenging is the uncertainty and the unpredictability of the weather, because you can look at a forecast, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be accurate. And so then you're trying to decide whether or not to send the aircraft to a station, say it is fogged in now, and it's a 2-hour flight time. So you think, well, in 2 hours, maybe it's forecasted to have lifted. And so you launch the flight, but then when it gets here, it may not necessarily be able to get in. So I think that's definitely the biggest challenge is the uncertainty of the weather.
And would you say like your job, just like in general, and like the rerouting specifically, like facing the challenges, would you say that's more of a group-oriented task or more of like an individual, just you handling the brunt of, you know, the weather's unpredictability?
I do work with a team of people, but ultimately I am the one that has to make the decisions and come up with the plans. So in the operations center that I work in, there are flight dispatchers and they do all the flight planning and the fuel calculations for the aircraft. There's crew schedulers that are constantly trying to replan their side of the operation, which, you know, if an aircraft is stuck, that crew is supposed to do a different flight, or dealing with book offs and trying to restaff. There's maintenance coordinators as well, so they get all the calls from the pilots across the network and they can walk them through when there's maintenance issues. So ultimately everyone's kind of an expert in their own role, and then when their role will impact the operation, then that's when they'll bring the information to me, and then I have to make a decision or a recovery plan.
Do people go to college to study like a specific major, or do they like start working at the airline and then they decide like kind of what they do?
That's a good question. You can really do it both ways. Some roles you would need specific licenses for example, to be a flight dispatcher, but you don't necessarily need to go to college for that. There are programs that can help like guide you to get your exams written and your license, but you can also study by yourself and take the exams. They're free to write from the government of Canada. So I wouldn't say you necessarily need to go to school to get any of these roles, but if you do go to school, it does help, and it does give perspective as well for the role that you're working in, because then you're able to kind of come at it with like a different perspective, or come at it with different just a different background too. So I went to Seneca College. It's in Toronto, and the courses that I took for that program were everything from safety to emergency planning to security to airline operations to airport operations. It really helped me kind of open my eyes to different careers that are available even in aviation. And I was already working in aviation, but it really still kind of helped, just kind of like to open my eyes and to bring perspective. Even something like emergency planning was something that I never really knew much about, but after taking that course at Seneca, it was actually something that I was really interested in.